Good morning. Welcome to the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. I am Krista Yoakum, currently the chair. To my right is Commissioner Sean Flowerday. To my far right is Commissioner Roma Amundson. To my left is Rick Vest. To my far left is Commissioner Matt Schulte. Please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with us. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may start with the announcements, Mr. Clerk.
Location announcement of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located at the wall of the rear of the hearing room. Additionally, all written material to be discussed at today's open meeting is available for electronic viewing from the county clerk staff. Printing options are available upon request. These materials can also be viewed at the county's website at lancaster.ne.gov. First item, number 1, minutes. Approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held on August 1st, 2023.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. I see no further discussion. Please call the roll.
Vest.
Abstain.
Amundson.
Yes.
Schulte.
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Yoakum.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with an abstention. Item 2, claims. Approval of the claims processed through August 8th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims. Please call the roll.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Vest.
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Schulte.
Yes.
Yoakum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 3, consent items. These are routine business items that are expected to be adopted without dissent. Any individual item may be removed for special discussion and consideration by a commissioner or by any member of the public without prior notice. Unless there is an exception, these items will be approved as one single vote of the Board of Commissioners. These items are the approval of Amendment to County Contract C-20-0550 with Superstream for carpet upholstery cleaning. Right-of-way contracts with the following: Valeric LLC, South 120th Street and Pioneers Boulevard in the amount of $3,264.98. Larry Nair Trust, South 120th Street and Pioneers Boulevard in the amount of $4,866.40. Utility permits allowing Bauer Underground Incorporated under product management of JEO Consulting Group Incorporated to install underground ductwork for future installation of communication cable for ARPA Broadband Phase 2 at 1, number 2401 for Run 2 along South 96th Street and Princeton Road, and 2, number 2402 for Run 3 along Panama Road. Change order number 1 to County Contract C-23-0293 with Highway Improvement Incorporated for crack sealing project overrun, increasing the county price by $23,658.30. Grant contracts with the following: 1, Center for People in Need for the Neighborhood Food Program in the amount of $21,321. Good Neighbor Community Center for the Basic and Emergency Needs and Food Distribution Program in the amount of $123,600. United Way of Lincoln for the Clarity Food Distribution Program in the amount of $8,000. And 4, Cedars Youth Services for the Tracking Services Program in the amount of $15,000. And then F, receive and place and file the following reports for July 2023. Clerk at the District Court, Assessor Register of Deeds, Records and Information Management, and County Clerk.
Move approval of the consent items?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Yes.
Just so I can make a comment, I was looking at the department reports and the records report last year on images scanned. They had a massive improvement in the number of images scanned. Almost every month were 20% higher than other months. Only 2 months were below previous years. And so just kudos to that department on continuing to serve our county and our city as well.
Mm-hmm. Please call the roll.
Schulte.
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Vest.
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Yoakum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 4 is new business. Item A, recommendations from the Personnel Policy Board. For 1, create the following classifications: Marketing and Outreach Coordinator and Payroll Administrator, and 2, revise the classifications of Payroll Specialist, Payroll Coordinator, and Building Cleaner. Hi, Matt Hanson, Lancaster County Clerk. As we mentioned previously, last month we did some updates to our accounting operations manager, and I told you there'd be some corresponding changes to our payroll positions. That's what we're doing with officially creating a payroll administrator that will supervise, and we're updating coordinator and specialist to reference that administrator is the supervisor. So as for the updates in this, my department of those items, that's the reason.
Are we doing, yeah, we're just doing both? So we're doing A1?
Sure.
Move approval of A1.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve A1. Please call the roll.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
4A1 passes 5-0.
And then move approval of 4A2. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 4A2. Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 4B, resolution in the matter of the 2023-2024 annual cost of living wage adjustments for unrepresented classified county employees, attorneys 1 and 2, district court staff attorneys, law clerks, emergency management specialist, and deputy sheriff captains and psychologist.
This is the 4.5, right? Okay. Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve. Please call the roll.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 4C, contract with Navia Benefit Solutions to provide administrative services for the county's health, flexible spending, and dependent care, flexible spending employee benefit plans. The cost of the county is not to exceed $20,499.
Move approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4D, a legal engagement with Klein Williams Wright Johnson Oldfather LLP to provide professional legal services to Lancaster County.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Please call the roll.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item E, 4E, agreement with Felsberg, Holt, and Olvig for on-call environmental engineering services at the request of the county engineer. The cost of the county for a 2-year term is not to exceed $30,000.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. This is our on-call contract for when we have more, I'll call them emergency environmental issues. The long-eared brown bat has become one of those issues with the storms from a couple weeks ago, trees that fell in the storm. We actually have a certification process we have to do in order to clear those trees now. And so it's a $300,000 fine to mess this up. We don't want to mess it up, so we have been coordinating with Felsberg, Holt, and Ullvig for not only bat studies, but for other environmental studies regarding wetlands and other things.
Move approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this agreement. Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundsen,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4F, a right-of-way certificate with LPA encroachments review related to paving improvements to South 98th Street from Old Cheney Road to A Street.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Legg with Lancaster County Engineering Department. This right-of-way certificate and the attached encroachment review is probably the next to the last step before we get this project let. It's been a long journey to get the federal aid project pushed through. We just got the environmental completed a little over a week and a half ago, and we're ready to turn this project in. In fact, we've turned it in This is what the last piece that we need from you. This is to, one, certify we've reviewed the existing right-of-way that we have for any encroachments, and encroachment is public use or private use of public right-of-way or any hazards that are within that right-of-way. And then the right-of-way certificate to say that all the right-of-way has been acquired. In this case, we did not have to acquire any right-of-way.
It has been a long process. I see the,
Good morning, John Ward with the County Attorney's Office. I would just note that around the time the agenda came out on Friday afternoon, engineering did send me an updated encroachments review page, which was page 2 of the link document for the agenda. There are 2 less encroachments listed on that, and that's signed by Mr. Legg. So I would ask the board for approval of that with the amended second page.
thank you.
And part of the reason for that is I told NDOT that, hey, once I get my environmental document, 2 weeks later, I can turn the project in. Well, they asked for it 1 week later, so we're scrambling just a little bit, but we'll get her done.
And I just want to thank Larry and the team for that 1 week turnaround on what is a really large 3-mile project. The reality is that we needed to make that deadline in order to have the possibility of bidding this project in September, which I think will get us really aggressive pricing. And these projects are challenging, especially with the federal funds. So thanks, Larry.
Move approval of F.
Second.
Second, assuming that approval is amended.
Correct, yes, of the amended document. Yes, thanks for clarifying.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this right-of-way for certificate with the amended second page. Please call the roll.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Brings us to item 5, public comment. Those wishing to speak on items related to county business not on the agenda may do so at this time.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Penny Stevens, and I'm here speaking about election integrity and transparency. I wanted to bring up back in January of 2020, a bill was introduced by Senator Brewer. It was in January, and what it had multiple items in it, but it was to amend the voting laws. And so I wanted to state that when Wayne Benna said there was no laws changed, there actually was law changed in 2020 election. So I just wanted to clarify that. And so then in February, they had the hearing for this LB 1055. And there were 3 individuals that were there, lobbyists, that showed up. And one individual was Weston Miller, and he works for Civic Nebraska. And one of the senators asked him, if you were going to commit voter fraud, how would you go about it? And how would you go about doing it? And he said, oh my gosh, how would I commit voter fraud? And everybody laughed. And this is in the transcript. I'd have to be really smart, and I'd have to have a pretty well-established criminal network. And then everybody laughed again. And he went on to say, in order to pull off voter fraud with vote by mail ballot, you would have to find someone who, let's see, you'd have to seal it up in an envelope, you'd have to forge a signature and hope that the trained staff didn't notice that. And then you'd seal the envelope shut, mail it back in the right timeline, and hope to God that the person doesn't actually try to vote on their own. And if any of the other things go wrong, you would go to jail. It would. It's just never happened in Nebraska. So here then, that was February 5th. So in January, when this is introduced about changing all the mail-in ballots, it also was about putting drop boxes. And so this was in January, and there was a big push for this. You know, we didn't even know really about COVID at that time. And even by February 5th, when this hearing was pushed in, there was no pandemic announced. That didn't occur until later, maybe even in March. So all the senators voted for, and then 2 passed. They did not want to vote. And here you can see that they were talking about secure ballot drop boxes and maintaining the security of each and every drop box that was in every county. And there was no provision on how secure those drop boxes were. So Civic Nebraska then came out with, in May of 2020, they announced that 471,434 ballots were cast, and more than 400,000 of those in the 2020 primary were mail-in ballots. Now, only 71,000 people voted in person? I don't know. That's just very, very odd. That's quite an increase. So then, Civic Nebraska put out on their website that vote by mail was 78% of the Nebraska voters. Every voter received an application. And this was, they stated this was the first time this was ever done. And this was from John Cartier, Voting Rights Director at Civic Nebraska. And this was 5 times as many as the total amount of people voted by mail in Dodge County. I wanted to go on to state here real quick. The Hill, they put out documents how to steal an election. And here, if you want to see where Bob Evnen talked about losing 25,000 ballots. It's at 25kmia.us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janine Pressler. Excuse me. And I'd like to read a couple affidavits and some information about some of the findings in other states that also support what we're experiencing here in Nebraska. This first affidavit is from Deborah. She said, I did receive 1 ballot I requested from Fred Mitty's office in Dodge County, Nebraska for the November 3rd, 2020 election. But I also received 3 other ballots from whoever. One of them came months after the 2020 presidential election. The additional 3 ballots that came were not on as heavy a paper. Deborah lives in North Bend, Nebraska. Another state that had ballots on a different weight of paper is the next section. Forensic studies into the 2020 Detroit, Michigan election finds up to 34,000 illegal ballots. And additional warnings from Detroit clerks that thousands of absentee paper was different than normal ballot paper. A national expert in criminal forensics completed a report into the 2020 election in Nebraska, or in Michigan, and has found further evidence of chronic systemic voter fraud, especially among absentee ballots in that challenged election. The firm is Specton Forensics, and they have wide national experience testifying in criminal trials. Through their investigation, where they were allowed limited access to the 2020 election in Wayne County, which covers Detroit, they found the following. A significant number of absentees in different precincts illegally had no signed ballot application. Many absentee ballots had no request whatsoever. In the 2 primary precincts examined, the rates of illegal ballots were 12% and 20%. Absentee ballots had a lighter tone and a shade of printing. The Detroit clerks even commented to the Spectin team that the type of paper felt different. If the numbers of absentees missing a ballot request are extrapolated out to the rest of Wayne County, Spectin reports, with approximately 170,000 AV ballots, the range at 8 to 20% would be 13,600 to 34,000 ballots, with no application requesting the ballot. The next section is an affidavit from a gentleman by the name of Joseph. He lives in Lincoln, and he said, "I went to the polls to vote early in the morning of November 3rd, 2020. I overheard a poll worker tell 2 different people while signing in, 'The record shows you have already voted.' This seemed odd to me." This polling location was at Campbell Elementary School, 2200 Dodge Street in Lincoln. He said, "I had waited to get inside. There was a long line, but this would have been shortly after the polls opened." Thank you.
Good morning again. My name is Roger Presser, Lincoln, Nebraska, Lancaster County. This affidavit is from a Melissa in Omaha, and this was during the 22 election. On November 4th, 2022, I went to the Millard Public Library to cast my vote. Upon walking in, I saw 2 lines. One line was shorter with 2 or 3 people. I went to the shorter line, but was told that the line was for people experiencing problems. So I got in the line to cast my vote. While waiting, I heard the people in the shorter line ask questions. They came to vote and they were unable to vote. There was already a vote cast for them. They were told to contact the voter registration office. Why are we told everything is fine by the Secretary of State in Wayne Benna when there's 2 separate lines? There was a study done in 2000. There was a study done in Detroit, Michigan, and 34,000 of the 2020 Detroit ballots were missing legally required origin requests of the ballot. These were illegal ballots. Eyewitness reports state that the counting board in the election night 2020 seen a large number of suspicious ballots that felt pre-printed and were suspiciously voting only for the presidential and Senate elections, and they came in at 3:30 in the morning. Another one describes counting military ballots and noticed that many of them were obviously appeared to be not valid military ballots. Another one saw that they didn't disqualify a single obvious illegal ballot. The report confirmed that there were thousands of absentee ballots in the 2020 election in Detroit, with no evidence that these ballots were ever requested. Were we distracted during that time? Had so many absentee ballots that we didn't check to find the people, if the people actually requested them? How many illegal votes do we have in our election? How many requested ballots with illegal signatures, as Mary witnessed in Omaha? And how many were told at the polls that they had already voted in Nebraska? And what I have on the screen here is this was a person in Papillion that was sent 5 different absentee ballot requests. This one came from the Centers for Voter Information out of Missouri, and in the the prepaid postage was paid in Pennsylvania. And I'm here to remind you that these were all sent to one person. This one came from Missouri again and prepaid out of Pennsylvania, but a little bit different change on it, in their names. This one came from Des Moines, Iowa, from the Center for Voter Information, and this has a different postage paid. Now, all have different lines of code on them, and these two are supposedly from Sarpy County, but they have different permits for their postage paid. The others include different addresses. I'm not sure that this is the gentleman's name, but one was addressed to John Smith III, another one was John Smith, Sunset View, and then Sunset View, just a different spelling. And so it's happening here in Nebraska. People are getting voting requests for ballots that they did not request. Thank you.
Good morning, George Olmer, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm just commenting a little bit here first on the editorial that was on 7/28 of 23. That was after the testimony by Mr. Benna and Todd Wilchins. One of the things there is touted, I think it plays with numbers on how many votes were actually tested by precincts that were counted. I think that's confusing. Also the point that the test runs were run at that time ahead of it. What good probably does test runs do if the hacking of those machines or the discrepancies are done after that's done in the real election? If you run a test run on machines, sure, they're going to look adequate. I just question that. We talk about, excuse me, we talk about evidence. I've stated before here that evidence is by hundreds and hundreds of people. If you go around the country, there's evidence by millions of people. They claim that up in New York, there's affidavits that have been put forward in the vicinity of 1 million affidavits. Like I stated last time, don't affidavits mean anything anymore? Isn't it a form of whistleblowing on things happening? And what do? Do we ignore all of these? They mean nothing. I spoke once before a little bit here about the Albert sensors. We've bought into the Albert sensors in this state. The Secretary of State did. Albert sensors they're basically a monitoring of our elections by the federal government through a nonprofit called CIS. We found out that Georgia was hacked into their own system back in 2016 by this very system. They were hacked, and the Secretary of State did not know about it. He was not warned that they were going to check in. Washington State bought into them. 2 counties up there found out that they were hacked, and that CIS, which is supposed to be guarding against that, did not catch it. As a result, they turned around and backed out of their contracts. That was Lincoln County and Ferry County in Washington State. All they got for their good efforts was to be berated by the media and PR. This is illegal of them touching their election. Yet this is our federal government actually playing and monitoring our elections. They're subject. Right in the quote is they're subject to be monitored by the federal government. I guess I will close maybe on the cast votes that are going around the country. We struggled here to get cast votes. We act like we can't come up with a cast vote system. It's happening around the country. My understanding is over 400 counties have come forward with their cast votes. And when that happens, we find the discrepancies and the illegal things that are going on. and that's not heard of. It's covered. Media is doing a great job of it. Powers to be. There's not an issue, in my estimation, out here that's more critical for the future of this country. I think one of your members spoke to my children, grandchildren. We got to save a country. You know, for them. Where are we going with a country if we don't have a trusted election system? It makes no sense. This is the demise of America if we don't get this straightened out. We need to go back to same day paper ballots, and we'll have a true election. That's been done in individual counties around the country in the last election, and it worked. Perfect auditing of those.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. My name is Peng Xiao. I came from Omaha. I'm also a university faculty member and performing research for bioinformatics and statistics. And I also, early this year, I gave my testimony in the state capitol about the election integrity bills. And because I have expertise in the computer science and for biology research, and then because the ESNS machine, they have the main board, the motherboard, they have multiple chips, and a lot of way, even they have a modem area, they can access the internet. And also the flash drive, if you have a very small the software like a coding, and then the flash drive can be like a Wi-Fi connector, and then to access internet. According to my knowledge, and they can use the flash drive to download some or transfer some data to the ESNS. So that's my really concerned about that part. And then for another part, for the statistical part, the MVAP just showed that in each county, and they have a specific regression that the line, and like in different age groups, the ratio of the voter roll, the registered number, and the ratio of the actual voting numbers over the registered numbers for specific that the age group, that ratio is the same in each county. That's impossible, because in each county, in the specific age, the ratio of the registered and the actual voter should be different, like follow some kind of random distribution, but that's the same. So the R regression value is like over 0.9. So that surprised me, because as a statistician, that's impossible unless somebody just manipulated. And also, I was the poll watcher last year in my county, and I found a lot of pitfalls. So the people with abstain ballots, they came to the on-site, and then the poll worker, and they just changed give them a provisional, paper ballots, and then they just fill out that ballots, and then mix them together with the actual, the voter on that day. And also at the 2 o'clock, they just send the half of the ballots, and then they took them out of the metal box, and then into a paper box, and then sealed the box, because the box has 3 ways to seal that. They just sealed both sides with the number. Even the ballot 2 and ballot 1 and ballot 2, the numbers are discrepancy. I found like a 7, ballots in the 1 and 2 are missing. In ballots 2 are missing, but the ballots 1 just like a 7 more than the ballots 2. So. And then the inspector just said, "Oh, that's normal if it's under 10." So he just by himself took that box without any monitoring, and people just beside him, and then just transferred that by his own car to the another location instead of election commission. So all the evidence just caught me that the warning. There's a lot of pitfalls, a lot of potential fraudulent chance during the election system, the procedure. And I just really just hope you guys can really take serious, because I came from China. I've been in Omaha for 21 years. So I didn't want to, because no matter how many evidence we showed in the state capitol, and then I just saw the same bureaucracy in this country, because I came to this country to pursue my freedom, and then this country is one nation under God, give that freedom, and attracted many people from all the nations. But how could this nation just became like this way? I just feel, am I in China sometimes? So I just really just hope you can take it for serious, because I don't want to, because now I became American citizen in July 3rd, 2019. But the next year, my first voting, that was stolen. That was really upset me. So I hope you guys can take it for serious. Thank you. God bless you.
Good morning. My name is Roland Dean Cook, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm also here to speak about the voter fraud. ES&S is blocking the evidence. The information that ES&S is seeking to hide from public disclosure contains the data and evidence that vindicate President Donald J. Trump and proves with absolute certainty that the 2020 and 2022 elections were significantly and materially impacted by massive election fraud via compromised election voting systems on a national basis. ES&S, the shadowy giant behind the nation's voting system, has unleashed a disturbing edict this week, instructing all municipalities to hide critical records, data, and reports related to government agencies run local, state, and federal elections. The battle for transparency. The public records request that spurred the ES&S security bulletin was sent out by Christopher Gleason on behalf of the Justice Society. In their edict, ES&S falsely states governmental agencies, customers, and election officials that their compliance with the Justice Society public records request for audit logs could potentially compromise the security of our elections. What information is ES&S trying to conceal? The logs and data requests are automatically system generated, and they are auditable date and time stamped record of activity and actions taken by the administrators and users of the ES&S software and systems. ES&S markets this functionality as a selling point to ensure security of our elections with their products. Okay. Go ahead, leave this. The audit logs generates a detailed audit log of all actions and events that have occurred on the unit, which can be printed at any time. Every action and event, including access attempts, access of system functions, and errors, is logged and time-stamped. I passed out a copy of those, so I'm not going to read all the security facts on this. But on the Model 73 DS200 scanners in Nebraska, Benna testified a couple weeks ago that none of these election machines were tied to the internet. This has been proven to be wrong. These models have been proven to have internet connectivity through audit in Antrim, Michigan. Counties in Nebraska, we believe, have DS&S 200 scanners. Sioux, Banner, Kimball, Grant, Hooker, Thomas, Blaine, Loop, Garfield, Wheeler, Brown, Rock, Kayapea, Arthur, McPherson, Logan, Chase, Dundee, Hayes, Frontier, and Pawnee, and Richardson. Now, for him to state that no machines have access to the internet is outright false. The DS tabulator, this is also included in the copy I gave you, but it explains how the tabulators work and and how the election management software is corrupt and corruptible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Connie Renke. We have started looking at the agreements between the Center for Internet Security. It sounds very governmental, but you'll find out that actually it's a private organization funded by Democracy Funding, a far left group. We found there was agreement with Nebraska signed by our Secretary of State, and also this is it. It's called a Memorandum of Agreement. And every county that's involved with CIS has to sign it in their county. We've asked in these meetings, what does the county commissioners have to do with the election? Well, if you look at the end of this agreement for Lancaster County, it seems that it was signed by Sean Flowerday. Here. We do not want this system in our county or in our state, and I would ask that it be reversed. In its description, in the contract, it says computer users in sum and substance following the provisions. Computer users have no reasonable expectation of privacy regarding communications, data transisting on or traveling to and from entities' information system. And any communications or data transing stored on traveled, any communications or data transiting stored on or traveling to or from entities' information system may be monitored, disclosed, or used for any lawful government purpose. This group called CIS started deploying what's known as Albert sensors. Yes, Nebraska has Albert sensors. This has been signed with CIS under auspices of protecting you from what's happening. And they can monitor everything 365 days per year, 24/7. These are the purchase contracts. I've showed these before with Nebraska. As you can see, there's ES&S voter systems for $4 million. Election systems and software, $15 million. No Ink, $192,000. Center for Internet Security, almost $250,000. These purchase contracts in Nebraska, these are in Nebraska. This software interfaces with CIS. They can now throw a bunch of management tools to inflate your voter rolls, deflate our voter rolls, change our votes, and yes, even override or overwrite your local jurisdiction results, push them back down to the canvassing boards, and certify something in the stranglehold of our Secretary of State. Everything is top down. The SOS and BENA and our counties are using software that's interconnected that allows for all of this. Others have taken snapshots of voter rolls and uncovered Albert systems in Florida through VR systems right around the time of the elections. In Florida, they saw voter IDs duplicate with fake addresses, moves from inactive to active. We've got a problem. This system is tied also to printing. You can print phantom ballots. You don't even need to mail them out. They don't even match. We can't see. There's no transparency. In Florida, they switched addresses, birthdays, ages. This has been all recorded by a group in Florida of the registration voter rolls. Automation to cheat has been proven in New Mexico and Florida. We want paper ballots hand counted at the precinct level under video surveillance.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Amber Parker. The Dell computers that have came in on the Secretary of State's watch into the state of Nebraska election offices have all been filtered through the Chinese military. Dell makes the computers, and the Chinese military official inspects the order before it leaves the manufacturing plant. The tabulators we use that are being forced on us by Wayne Baina and the Secretary of State Evan, some of the components are made in China as well. And it was greatly troubling that Secretary of State, Wayne Baina, he's speaking more than Secretary of State. He came forward and he addressed questions that, quite frankly, Evan should have, because he was the one we were told was elected. So why is Wayne Baina going across and carrying the narratives and then taking the credit in 2020 for bringing machines into the counties? And so what's interesting is we keep hearing that these machines are not connected to the internet. Well, they do come standard with internet connectivity. According to Colonel Sean Smith, you guys say you want evidence. Well, another expert had came and testified as a public testimony in front of the state legislature. And Colonel Smith is a retired Air Force colonel who sat at the top of the Department of Defense, was responsible for securing our nation's weapons defense systems. He had the highest level of security clearance, and it doesn't get any better than him as far as knowledge of what it takes to secure computer systems. He said it is impossible to secure our election systems. What Colonel Sean Smith, in what his expertise and background and what I just read, he was referencing the Nebraska election systems. I want to show you something that has been greatly troubling as I've looked at this. Now, you guys can go to Election Systems and Software, their website, and check this out. If you notice here, it talks about the county election office, licensed third-party provider, and 3 things in how the USB flash drives are used in 3 ways in elections in Nebraska: to load election info, to voting machines, to collect and store election results, to transport election results after polls close to the election office. Interesting, election results. You'll notice on the right-hand corner, election day, voting equipment at polling places. Underneath, you'll see the word election results USB flash drive. Why should this bother and bring you guys nightmares that are warnings to wake up and may God rebuke you? Is because on your watch and Flower Day, realizing and hearing the new information, 2008, there was a cyber attack against the United States military. And how did this happen? It was through an infected flash drive that was put in a United States military laptop. Now you explain to me, why hasn't Wayne Baina, nor the Secretary of State, nor the Attorney General addressed these areas to say, we need to pull these machines. These flash drives right here, things can hide in them. I want to read another area that needs to be brought to your attention. A thumb drive can have encrypted hidden storage on it that isn't readable or indexed without the app that created it and can read it. I now want to bring your attention to Article 1, Section 22 of the Nebraska Constitution. elections to be free. All elections shall be free, and there shall be no hindrance or impediment to the right of a qualified voter to exercise the elective franchise. There are back doors that open for hacking, and as we have, others have shared in concerned citizens, these algorithms that are being shown, and you had an expertise come before you today, and I say no longer do you have any excuses in where you're at. And I just want to say for the record, Amundsen, Flowerday, Yoakum, Vest, and Schulte are all present in this meeting. Thank you.
Ken Anderson, Omaha, Nebraska. This is a continuation of what I introduced last week. So this will be a per voter notice that can be given to election commission officials. Dear election officials, per state Supreme Court rulings, etc., an enforceable implied in fact contract arises between parties who signify agreement through an action, as in a voter surrendering a completed ballot according to instructions of election officials. Implied warranties and implied duties always accompany implied in fact contracts. This notice to you by me, the undersigned voter, reminds you of said contract and the accompanying implied warranties and duties that are binding by law upon you. By no means is this notice intended to educate you about centuries-strong precedent, so if said subject is unfamiliar to you, you seriously need to consult your legal counsel lest you risk being derelict in your due diligence. This notice reminds you that among a number of other responsibilities said contract binds you to, you are legally bound to implied warranty and implied duty. Merely one of many aspects of the warranty is that you most accurately and honestly count and report all legitimate ballot selections while preventing dilutions by counting illegitimate votes. Vote totals in many recent elections have been in excess of the expected numbers of votes allowed, and I will no longer tolerate such breach of implied contract if it continues. Along with this is the implied duty to consider the most verifiable cast ballot by me to be the one and only authoritative ballot cast by me. I will not tolerate that my in-person ballot surrendered to you when I've presented irrefutable proof of my identity is destined for the category of provisional because an unknown person previously submitted a ballot in my name. This implied duty demands that you consider ballots surrendered to you by or in my name, but without ID, to be more provisional than my just-in-time ballots when I show valid ID. Another of many implied duties incumbent upon you is that you reveal relevant information to me, including the fact, if true, that my ballot selections are converted into unsupervisable electronic signals prior to them being counted, and that those unsupervisable electronic signals are the most authoritative basis by which race results get reported. If any relevant facts are not acceptable to me, then I will be entering said contract under duress. As you can manifestly understand, the unsupervisable possession in modifiable format of my ballot selections prior to counting by an entity whom I've not vetted for their character, motives, objectivity, etc., would certainly be unacceptable to me. And I finish up this presentation of this postcard design by saying that the implied in fact contract requires consideration. I'm aware of that. Normally that'd be money. The Nebraska statutes require that voting be free, elections be free and secure. And secure, is that the word? I believe it is. That statute then obligates the state to make the payment that an implied in fact contract would require to be a real contract. So The spirit of that law, that elections be free, is not to obviate the existence of an implied in fact contract. It's actually to allow those that cannot afford otherwise to enter into an implied in fact contract with election officials. And thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Richard Herget, and I would like to give my time to Connie, if at all possible.
I'm sorry, she's already spoken.
I can't give my time to her? I got 4 minutes or 5 minutes. Why can't I give that to her so she can finish her?
One time per person.
Well, looks like we need to change some elections. I can't understand why I cannot offer my time to a constituent that wants to give information to you guys that you don't want to hear. You're pretty much telling me that you don't care what we're telling you today. Is that right? You can answer yes or no.
Sir, this isn't a dialogue with the board. I would note at the beginning of the agenda, it does say each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. So
right.
I think that's part of the reason why we don't allow others.
But why can't I waive my time to somebody else?
Because that person would then be getting more than 5 minutes.
At a time.
No, it's just 5 minutes.
Well, we need to change some laws.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Kate Leising, and first of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of all the people speaking today, as well as all the people that have come before me. I live in Arizona part of the year. I live in Nebraska part of the year. I love both states. They're great states, and I love our country very much, which I believe was founded on the principles of democracy, fairness. The right to vote has been such an important issue over the years. Wars have been fought, lives have been lost, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, et cetera, et cetera. I have 3 grown sons. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat, and one quit voting way before the 2020 election because he said, "Mom, the elections are all fixed. They're all rigged." And I used to argue with him and say, that can't be. This is America. You know, we are a fair country. This just can't be. And believe me, when they all turned 18, I drug them to the polls and made sure that they voted every year. But now, after the 2020 election, and some even prior to that, and what's happened in Arizona, and what I've seen and learned about what's happening in Nebraska, I'm afraid I'm kind of inclined to agree with my youngest son, Ben. You've heard a lot of statistical, logical information, algorithms have been presented, which, by the way, I'd never really understood the algorithms until I went to hear Dr. Clements, who is the law professor from New Mexico, speak, and now I understand it much better. So I think there's a preponderance of information and evidence out there that says this is something we should look at. Anecdotally, when we were driving back from Arizona to Nebraska 2 days after the 2020 election, we went through 7 different states, took a little vacation trip. And I finally noticed the preponderance of signs, huge signs, billboards that said Trump, vote for Trump, blah, blah, you know, definitely Trump. Huge signs, like as big as semi-trucks. Some of them were semi-trucks. So I finally started counting. By the time we got back to Phoenix, the count was 23 Trump, 2 Biden. And I know when I went to bed that night, on the night of the election, you know, things were looking one way and they were so dramatically different the next morning. So I didn't used to believe that these little computers could control our lives so much. But if you haven't seen the movie 2000 Mules, or you haven't studied the research and the lectures, the statistical analysis done by Dr. Clements, I would please encourage you to do that. I know as politicians, you have to be very good communicators. And as a doctor in speech and language pathology communication, we teach our students that 70% of good communication is listening, being a good listener. So please, this is such an important issue. Please listen to all these people, all the good things they have to say, and educate yourselves about some of the other things. Be open-minded to the fact that it's looking more and more and more, and there are many people convinced that there's a problem here in Paradise, that the voting machines are not a good way to do. We need to change things. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak during public comment?
Hello, my name is Doug Hennon. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. All I can really say is, respect your time, but appreciate if you guys would take heed and listen. It seems like as you listen, there just seems to be a lot of distraction. I'm sure you've heard a lot of this stuff before, but as a constituent, it seems there's evidently a lot of evidence that's pointing that there's questionable things that are going on. And I would appreciate if you would give this consideration of your time. There's many more people that would like to be here, as was mentioned last week, that people that are working, that care about this issue. And I think it's something that's very important. If you take a look at what's going on in our country with what's happening to our youth and everything, it all centers around who gets elected into office and how that falls into place. And integrity is something, if it was your children, your parents, whatever the case is, integrity is worth something. And just like Dr. Kate Lysing said, it isn't looking like it's very fair. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak during public comment? I see none.
Commissioners, that brings us to announcements. Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold a staff meeting on Thursday, August 10th, 2023 at 8:30 a.m. in room 112 of the County City Building. Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold the following meetings on Tuesday, August 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in room 112 of the County City Building. That is the regular meeting, a public hearing regarding the vacation of certain portions of right-of-way near the intersection of West Prucha Street and Southwest 112th Street in Crete, Nebraska, and the Board of Equalization. County Commissioners can be reached at 402-441-7447 or commish@lancaster.ne.gov. Lancaster County Board of Commissioners meeting is broadcast live on LNK TV. LNK TV is available on Allo Channel 2 and Spectrum Channel 1300. For the rebroadcast schedule, visit lincoln.ne.gov. Meetings are also streamed live on YouTube and Facebook. LNK TV apps are available on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Last item I have is adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Schulte?
Yes.
Flowerday?
Yes.
Vest?
Yes.
Amundsen?
Yes.
Yocum?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. We're adjourned.
We will move immediately into the Board of Equalization meeting. However, I would like a minute to see if I can figure out power to my computer. It looks like it's plugged in down below.
I know that's working.
I'm glad to too.
Okay.
I'll probably call him this afternoon.
Okay. Okay, we can start, yeah. Good morning. Welcome to the Lancaster County Board of Equalization meeting for Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. I am Krista Yoakum. I'm currently the chair. To my right is Commissioner Sean Flowerday, the vice chair. To my far right is Commissioner Amundson. To my left is Commissioner Rick Vest, and to my far left is Commissioner Matt Schulte. This meeting is held in accordance to the Nebraska Open Meetings Act, and there is a copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act at the rear of the room. Those wishing to speak on items specific to today's agenda are asked to do so when the item is called by the county clerk. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, and time limits we may have discussion, we may have questions, we may extend time limits briefly. The first item on the agenda is the notice of the assessed valuation change for property taxation purposes. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Madam Chair. Brian Grimm, Lancaster County Assessor, Register of Deeds. This is a property that one of our appraisers caught this just during a review process. This property inadvertently was put in a wrong market area upon putting it in the correct one and then doing a recalc on it. It brings up the value that it should have been at. And that's what we ask you today, is to do a value change on this particular property.
I would move approval.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second then to approve this valuation change. Please call the roll.
Vest?
Yes.
Amundson?
Yes.
Schulte?
Yes.
Flowerday?
Yes.
Yoakum?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Brings us to item 2, the protest of assessed value for destroyed real property, Form 425 from Jeff Shoemaker.
Good morning, Commissioners. This was continued from, I believe, a couple weeks ago. There's a question whether it fit. Went back and read the statute. The board has until August 10th to take action on it as it lines up with all the other protests. I spent a lot of time reading the statute, all the history. As it says here today, I really do not have a recommendation. I don't know if this fits. The law just is not that clear on this. I read the letter. What's not clear to me is if it was a space here that was left plugged in, does that count? I don't know. We have a case before the Nebraska Supreme Court right now. It'll be the first time there's any sort of clarity given to this law. At this point, I would just like to wait and see what the Supreme Court says on that. That may help us decide how this case should be resolved. Mr. Schumacher has the ability to appeal to the Turk, and depending on what the Supreme Court says, we may be able to resolve this short of having a hearing in that case. So at this point, I would recommend just denying it until we get that decision from the Supreme Court.
Just so I can understand, denying what exactly is the denial?
We are denying, sorry, we are denying that he does not get the lower property value. His property won't be reassessed.
We're denying his protest, and then he can appeal the turf.
But you feel like the law is unclear on it?
It is very unclear.
So, I mean, would there be anything wrong with us accepting the?
The problem would be that he may get a benefit that other people have not gotten. Everything's assessed on January 1st. There's a question of how constitutional this law actually even is. Everyone else is being valued on January 1st. Whether or not this fits or not, I just don't know. He may be getting a break that other people wouldn't have the same opportunity to get, in a sense.
He also had a fire that most other people don't have.
Yes, I understand that. You know, the statute does say, though, that destroyed real property does not include property that is caused by the owner of the property. Yeah. So what does that mean, caused by? Does that mean it has to be the source of it? Or what does that mean? The law just is not very clear, and the legislature of history is not all that helpful in deciding some of these cases that are more kind of, I call borderline. There's some that would appear to certainly fit. There's other ones like this where it's like, well, where does that fall within these statutes? Is this allowed or is it not? So that's just where I'm struggling, is there's no clarity for me.
We certainly have sympathy towards his situation, yes. But we don't want to make an exception that we can't do for everyone.
And there are other people in similar circumstances that we have denied. No, it's sucks.
I mean, there's good intentions behind it, and I understand them. It just puts us in a very difficult position. I mean, even the statute draws a line between someone's property is destroyed on June 30th versus July 1st.
Yeah.
They're treated very differently. You know, kind of as a personal story, my grandpa had his barn burned down because one of my cousins parked a tractor in that was leaking diesel, and it spontaneously combusted. Well, is that covered by the statute? I don't know. I mean, it was...
Right. Well, and I mean, you look at the wildfires that we had last year, and I mean, we believe the origination of that was man-made, but then the wind conditions, the natural conditions took it away.
Yeah.
Like, is that a natural fire or is that a man-made fire? And it's not.
That's kind of where I throw my hands up too. Is like, I don't know. I mean, great intentions, but when it kind of comes down to those who have to interpret this, it's just very difficult to understand how this should actually work.
Yeah.
So, it's in this, before the Supreme Court now, Dan?
Correct. The people who have appealed it, the appellants have filed their brief. We are in the process of drafting our brief. It's due the 21st. I would anticipate it'll probably be set for oral argument sometime in October, if I were to guess. And then when we get an opinion, I mean, it'll be an issue of first impression for them, but it's also a very legal issue, so.
Yeah, these have been among the most difficult decisions we have, as a board, had to make, because we empathize so much with people who've had their lives changed dramatically. To have your house burned down, so difficult emotionally.
And all counties are struggling with this. I know I've been speaking with other counties, and they've struggled with it as well. They've kind of been looking to us, saying, how are we handling it? Which I guess it feels good and bad at the same time, because you don't want to be wrong.
No, I got it.
But a lot of them are interpreting it the same way that we are, and I think they've also expressed the frustration about, well, what does this mean? Is this covered or is it not covered? And we don't know.
This is just I did that on purpose. I'm sorry. This is just a reminder for all of us here, you know, that county government is a subset of state government. The legislature passes laws that we then operate under. And I know you've worked very hard on this issue. I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate your honesty here this morning. And so, not that I like it, not that I necessarily want it to be this way, but I think your advice to wait until the Supreme Court gives us direction, if I'm hearing you accurately, at that time, if we get a ruling that says we could go back then and...
Correct. I mean, if they come out and say fire means a fire from whatever source, then we can go back and say, okay, well, this clearly it is covered, and we can settle it that way then. But if they interpret kind of the way that we have, it means this, well, what's that actually mean then going forward? I mean, there's also the question in terms of when it says the property owner caused, because that's also kind of a question as well. Is what does it mean to cause the fire? If someone alters the drainage on their land, now their basement floods from a rain, did they cause it? I mean, you could argue that they did. No. This is where attorneys make a lot of money. It's finding those things.
I was thinking that. I wasn't going to say it out loud. But, okay. We all hate it. We all hate it. And we all empathize with the individuals involved here. But I feel like we've got a path before us to stay the course.
Are you making a motion?
I will make a motion that we hold on our decision previously made until we hear what the Supreme Court
We need a decision by August 10th.
Right.
Well, we make our okay. I make a motion that we hold with our decision previously made.
We delayed our decision previously.
We delayed that decision.
Yeah.
So we can't hold with it. We have to.
Oh, we didn't? Then
No,
I'm
we did not.
remembering the wrong situation.
It's come before us a couple of times now.
Yeah. I did move to deny it, and then Matt was the one that said what we need to do is to delay it, and so it
Might
was
have
an
been while
amended
you were gone.
motion.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So what we need now is a decision.
Well, go ahead, Sean, you've got a better
I was just
handle.
going to make a motion to deny.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to deny.
I guess I'll just make a comment. If the law is unclear, it's pending before the Supreme Court, we're in a gray space. So I'm going to just choose to stand with the property owner and vote no on this.
Please call the roll.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Schulte,
Nope.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1. Excuse me. That brings us to item 3, the property valuation protest dismissals. We have a series, and I'll read them all. 23-00783, Fellows Family Trust. 23-01396, Jesse Dennis. 23-02335, Ram Balsar-Baraman and Lena Subbaraman. 23-04343, Lennis Marshall and Kathleen Wires. 23-04381, Jolene Weiser and Kathleen Weiser. 23-4384, Richard K. Spencer, Revocable Living Trust. 23-04421, James B. Peter and Denise L. Tihan. 23-04433 from Pelican Finance LLP. 23-04434 from Pelican Finance LLP. 23-04435 from Casa Fiesta LLC. 23-04442 from Christy Rada. 23-04447 from Rebecca J. Cast Revocable Living Trust. 23-4448 from Gary and Carol Pullman. 23-04449 from Don Carmody. 23-04450 from Russell and Linda Sheffert. 23-04451 from Janine Judd's Revocable Living Trust. And 23-04452 from Linda Alsman Special Needs Trust.
As I mentioned last Thursday, there were some protests that we received that didn't meet the filing requirements. One thing to note from about D on, these were all some of the very last ones that we received. The clerk's office is very good about working with people that file and they're not complete. Leslie will often reach out and say, hey, you're missing your signature, we need this, whatever, and they're fixed. A lot of these, they were actually received after the filing deadlines. We received them in July, and we realized there's a problem, there just isn't time to fix it. And so all of these, A through Q, are missing something that's statutorily required by statute. Then if they are not proper, then the board's without authority to do anything on it, and they must be dismissed. So our recommendation is to dismiss those appeals.
And again, this is laid out in statute, and we really don't have
yes,
latitude to.
Correct. And the form, is it prompts it electronically? Is it prompts the things that are necessary? So people who choose to do it on paper tend to be more the ones that get caught, I would say. But again, the clerk's office works to try and fix these as soon as they're aware of it. Just, again, when they're kind of the last ones that come in, a lot of times they're past the filing deadline and nothing can be done.
Well, I would move to dismiss these property protest valuations due to incomplete records, incomplete paperwork.
I will second, but do we have people that are here to speak on this today is what I guess my question is. We have some folks in the audience.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is anyone here to speak on this, on these dismissals? No, doesn't look like it.
Okay. Real good. I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Schulte?
Yes.
Flowerday? Yes. Vest?
Yes.
Amundsen?
Yes.
Yocum?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to item 4, the final action on real property valuation protest for 2023.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you very much again. We're here again. Cody Gertis with Great Plains Appraisal. My partners, Lori Johnson and Jason Pickerel in the back, also co-coordinated with you guys. Thanks again to the board. Feels like we did 4,500 protests last week, so it was a long process. Leslie has kind of a bunch of the numbers and stuff in the breakdown. I know we always like to talk about a lot of that stuff, but we appreciate the board working with us, Dave. Thanks for everything. It's a pretty easy, smooth process anymore, it seems like. So we're still here. You still get to see me, but as you know, there's a lot of change. You know, the board changes a lot. We have a new county clerk, new assessor, and so there's new numbers. There was a revow, so it was a big change year for a lot of different things. I'm sure you guys have heard that from a lot of people. That being said, in terms of the changes, we had the process built out. You know, it was electronic. As Appreciate Dan and Corey working with us in the past, the board allowing us to build that electronic system. I don't know what everybody from the clerk's office thinks, but I don't know that if we had that electronic system that it would have been as easy to do 4,500. That would have been a lot of packets and a lot of paper to create, to get. And so working with the new clerk's office, working with the assessor's office was great. It was very seamless. It was smooth. One of the consistents was Leslie. Appreciate her very much. She's been great during this process. Again, lots of emails, lots of calls with her. It seemed like we were getting emails from her in the middle of the night, and she was getting them back from us in the middle of the night. So appreciate her efforts. Nicholas Wimhoff and Joseph Carter are the two that built this system for us. They get a lot of emails from us in the middle of the night or on the weekends, and we get immediate responses. So if it wasn't for them, it wouldn't be up. You know, it'll go down every once in a while. They almost call us before we call them. So in front of the board, I'd like to thank them especially. In terms of the clerk's office, we work with these guys a lot. We don't see anybody as much anymore. You know, we see everybody through basically email, but the process has gotten better. I think only 40% are on paper, and Leslie has a bunch of the numbers and stuff about that, but a lot of this is going electronic. It looks like 60% of them are electronic, so we're getting better data and easier and quicker. The ones that Dan just talked about probably are in paper still, and so we're still seeing that. I will tell you the clerk's office works with them repeatedly to get them, but I think getting that information there, and then talking to Corey at the assessor's office too, their appraisers are able to see that information too. So both departments working together is great. We're able to see what they have, they're able to see what we have. The clerk can access it, the assessor can access it, the appraisers, and ultimately makes the system better. One of the big things that we implemented a few years ago when Rob was still here was having someone from the assessor's office available. And it started with just Rob or Michelle would be out there just answering questions. And now we have every summer available for the assessor's office to go do new inspections. And so it is an electronic system that kicks out a number. And if you put something bad in, you'll get something bad out. Every summer we do a couple hundred of these inspections, and a lot of them do change. And so I think every year, if we're catching those, I think it's just making this system better. I was talking to somebody that used to work for us a couple decades ago, and he told me about the system, about how hard they work to make it better. And I would tell you the assessor's office is doing a great job, past and present. They're really trying to do a good job, and they do a good job. It is mass appraisal, and it's hundreds of thousands of parcels, but the notes are carrying through. It's a integrated system instead of being separate. So I appreciate the assessor's office. I appreciate Rob and Derek and Scott working with us in the past. And of course, now Corey and Dan are doing the same thing as well. So in terms of agencies working together and working with us, it's a great system. Appreciate that, and appreciate the board's work with that. I know Alice Lauer, Tim Seelock, Tim Johns, Brett Smith, and Phil Hughes, along with a lot of other appraisers, were doing those inspections, so I appreciate them. Essentially what we do is just say, hey, go out here on Tuesday. And as long as we give them 48 hours notice and give them a range from like 9 to 3, they make it work. And so they're working with property owners immediately. We get their notes back. As you know, we used to force a number, and then every year it would be, I don't have a pool, I don't have a pool, and you say I have a pool, and now we can take that pool off or fix the basement square footage. We're able to get into homes, into properties, look at, mostly improved properties that every year it's new ones, but it's ones that we haven't been in for years. You can see the notes, and it's been, we built this off of plans in 2002, and we've never been in this house. And so it makes the system better. Appreciate that. It's working great. Again, thanks to Dan Nolte, Corey, Leslie. And then Rob and Derek, we worked with them hard. These were essentially their numbers. Obviously there was some change there, but they worked really hard. I do appreciate their efforts. They built a system that we were able to use, and it's carried on to the new assessor as well. So, thanks to Dan Zig. We have a lot of questions in the summer that he brings to you, and it kind of can telephone them back to us, or gives us some ideas on how it should go, or what the law reads, statutes read. So again, thanks to Dan for all the help there. We had quite a few referees outside of our offices. Again, we brought 3 or 4 new ones in. I think all 3 of those were former residential appraisers here in Lincoln that we've known for quite a few years. And so we're always trying to build that staff up so we can, hopefully we don't have 45, 5, 6,000 protests, but I think we did less than 1,000 last year, and then to go to 4,500 was a big task. So Leslie has some of the numbers. I don't know if you wanted to talk about generally the numbers. I know we always want to talk about how many there were. And
Leslie, Bristol County Clerk's Office. Good morning. Like Cody mentioned, we had over 4,400 protests. Those can be filed between June 1st and June 30th if they were filed on our electronic database. Thank you to all of those filers. This requires a My Interlink ID that can be set up by any individual. I'm willing to help set those up with individuals and walk them through the process. And that really helps to catch any mistakes that could be made on paper. Just to note, we also have the paper forms. We also have a form that could be emailed to our office. So there were 3 different ways to file. Our big thing to note is we had 710 protests filed on June 30th. It's a lot of protests in one day. And I would like to take this opportunity quickly to thank my team, those who did this directly. So to Maggie and Lucy, thank you. We could not have done this without them. They were wonderful to step into a process that they did not understand, had never been through, and they did a great job. Very proud. As Cody mentioned, we had about 60% of our protests filed electronically using that My Interlink. That's wonderful. I think if anything good came out of our recent pandemic, that was one of those. People were getting used to filing more things online, doing things online. Just to let you know, in 2019, 39% of our protests were filed online. So that's a big jump, and appreciate people doing that. For those protests, about 75% of all of the protests filed chose to have a hearing, whether it was by phone or in person. 25% of the filings then chose to waive that hearing. We were very clear to people, though, just because they chose not to have a hearing did not mean that their information would not be reviewed. In fact, it must be reviewed, and people were grateful for that. Our in-person hearings, the number of protests that had an in-person hearing was 440. That does not mean that was that many filers, as we did have people who file multiple protests, but a protest must be filed per parcel ID. So we did have 440 parcel IDs that had in-person hearings. And we're very grateful for our partnership with the building that we did with the firefighters hall to allow us access and to be able to use their building to hold those.
Perfect.
Thank you.
One of the nice things about the electronic system is, and this is, I think we've done this the last couple of years, is that after you've had your hearing, since it is electronic, you're able to upload documents up to 7 days after the hearing. I think that's a great opportunity for someone that if they get there and we say, well, if you would have had this, it would have helped us. And you give them 7 days to get it back to us. It's a great system. The way that Nick and Joe have set up, it triggers us. It goes right into a box where we have to review it again, so there's nothing we can miss. One of the big things we talked about in like 2017, 2018 was, where is this, where is that? And I'd have a stack of stuff from Leslie to run back down or to get, and I'd have to drive it to Malcolm or Nebraska City or to Beatrice to get it to a referee or across town. And so now they can upload that back, they can get it into the system, then we have a chance to review it. So it gives them another chance to make the protest that they want complete. And sometimes they don't know what it is until they get in there. A huge part of our process, while it is the valuations, it's also education. You know, we're trying to understand and teach them what it is and what we're looking for and what they need. So the system itself has worked great in terms of that. And so we really appreciate that. The other thing in terms of coordinating and reviewing for us is that the 3 of us can sit down, and we did just the other day, where we can sit down and look at all of the multifamily. We can look at all of a certain property type, all of the acreages, all the farms, whatever it might be, and do an actual comprehensive review overall, rather than in the past, and it was just a system we were working with, but if a protest got done in June, we'd be trying to get it down to these guys so they could put the numbers in right away, because it was 4,500 or 7,000 protests that we had to do longhand. So we'd get it down in June, and then at the end of July, we'd have another property that maybe would affect that property, or we want to be equalized with it. Now we can sit down and say, let's look at all of them. And that's what Jason and Lori and I did the other day. We'd sit down and just say, let's look at all the single family. Or you could sort it by property type, by area. You could say, okay, it looks like we changed a bunch up in Northeast Lincoln. Why is that? And so it gives us a chance, and for the board's purposes, to be better equalized and have better data out there. So it's a great system for us. We try to be consistent and try to do good work for the board as well. So with that, if you guys have questions about anything, I can certainly answer them. Appreciate your time today.
As I just kind of flip through the listed documents, I mean, what percentage, any idea, like you said 4,400 people applied, how many got a change in valuation? Do we know approximately that?
I don't know that answer.
I do not have that number available, though the report that is attached to your agenda, the 630-page report, it does show on the far right-hand side whether a property value is what their recommendation is, if it is different than what the assessor's office had it at. Without sitting down and actually going through the numbers, I am unable to tell you what those recommendations are or how many percentage-wise would change. However, I would add that is something that our database can and does track, and at a different point in time, I would be able to answer that for you.
I mean, it looks to me like maybe about 10%. So just help me and the public understand, like, what leads to a good, you know, in the property owner's eyes, what leads to a positive outcome of a lowered property value in this referee process?
There's a lot of different reasons why, but I will tell you one of the biggest changes we always see is making sure that the listing is correct. And so understanding is, you know, does the property listed on the assessor's office system correctly? If it's kicking it out and it said CDU is kind of the current condition. And so if the entire block is all, for example, a 3 and there's one that's a 4, usually a 4 means it's been renovated, there's something different there. If that's correct, then that's fine. It should be the nicest house in the block. If it's incorrect, or if someone got one CDU wrong in a span of 50 homes, we'll send the clerk's office, gets together with the assessor's office, we send them out there, and then they look at it and they say, okay, I looked at every house on this block, and I think that this is average like all the rest of them. We'll change it. The assessor gives us a new number, and it changes the system. So a huge amount of the changes are is that we're trying to understand exactly what's there so that what gets kicked out is a good number. There's quite a few sales. There's quite a few appraisals every year. That's the biggest changes I would see, is correct data or good current market data. So appraisals, sales. We'll verify the sales to understand, did you sell it? Was it on the market? Did it meet the requirements of a market sale transaction? You know, there again, too, I don't know exactly the numbers when the assessor stops building their database, but sometimes something sells at the very end of the year, and it's not in that system as of January 1. So it's a new sale. It's a sale of subject, sale of the property next door. It's very good, compelling data that's very fresh. Absolutely take a look at that. People are refinancing. They were refinancing before the end of the year, before the interest rates started going up more. So we'll use those appraisals. That's a lot of it, I would say.
Well, I did notice that there was a $51,038,600 difference.
Yeah, and I think we looked at that. We can look at this. You can pull this same sheet up for years gone by. I think that was really similar to last year. So we had more protests, but it was a different number. We don't track the changes percentage because I think of it as 100%. We give every property owner 100% of our effort, 100% of our time, and if it's due a change, we do it. So if you ask me how many changed, I say 100% of the ones that had a change that needed to be done. We try to be as good as we can. But on the other hand, the assessor's office has done a great job of building these numbers. They do a really good job of understanding what the properties are. And so with the process being the burden of proof is on the property owner, we review what the assessor's office has done. And if they've done a good job and the other stuff is just, I don't like the number, there's a considerable amount of I don't like the number. And you may not like the number, but can you prove it to us or our referees?
This has been a long process. Since I came on the board, we actually started moving towards clearing up any uncertainties or any areas that might be difficult to understand. And it just sounds like to me, as we've gone through that, one thing I want to say, you've been more than willing to make adjustments, or when problems showed up, you brought them to us, and we were able to make the adjustments needed to simplify this process and to make it as clear-cut as possible. There's no such thing probably as perfect, but we've worked very hard so the taxpayers have the real opportunity here. 4,500, that's a lot of folks who took advantage of the opportunity, and it sounds like we moved through it as well as anybody could have expected. And I know that's a tribute to you, Corey, and your team's work, so, and Leslie and your team. So thank you all for going through this very, very challenging process. So do we need a motion at this point?
Do we, yeah, we can do the motion in a second and then have community members come forward.
Is that it?
You have them come forward before the motion, at least what you said at the beginning, but.
Pardon?
You read at the beginning that they can come forward after it's read.
Yeah, okay. Are there members of the community that want to come forward to speak? If so, we ask that you please sign in and then state your name for the record. I also want to caution, we can't, yeah, we do want the timer. We can't, we've been cautioned not to accept new information at this point. And we will use the timer. So there's a little screen in front of you that will go from green to yellow to red when it's time to stop.
Good morning. My name is Mary Beth Jones. I live at 541 South Cotner Boulevard. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate the ability to be able to do this. As Corey was saying, if the assessor has it right, then things are pretty smooth, and I understand that. However, I don't believe it was listed correctly on the assessor's site. In our backyard, we built a building. We built this as not a guest house as it is listed on the county assessor site. It is in fact an ADU. It was titled that way. We have a deed that way. We walked through all the process to make it that way. In my paper valuation protest form, I said that we have one address. It's not a separate address. It's not a cottage. It has one utility service. It's not a separate entity from our home. It was intended for space for our out-of-town children and grandchildren. We have kids in Chicago and kids in Colorado, and they come and they don't upset the whole apple cart. They can stay in their own space. It works great for our family. As of January 1, this was not a finished space. The current valuation of my home is at $238,800. The proposal is $453,000, almost double. Would you call that the entry to a $200,000 home? Nope. This is what this house looked like December 29th of 2022. Final inspections were not done. As a matter of fact, we didn't get the plumbing inspected until January 9th. We had no toilet whatsoever. We had no sinks. The flooring was incomplete. We had to get 2 more inspections January 1. The law says January 1. So we walked up yesterday. My husband went up to talk with the guys at planning department. Talked with Nate Patterson. He said this inspection was completed January 10th, and that was as of yesterday. And he was able to say, you didn't have a unit until we call it a unit. Somehow or another, the assessor stamped that this is a guest cottage. It's never been a guest cottage. It is, in fact, an ADU. In addition to that, so I'm not going to bore you with other people in my neighborhood within a mile from me that have larger buildings with in-ground pools and their houses similar to mine, but they're over $100,000 less. You guys know all that. But I will tell you that our own main home has some issues, and we've been holding our breath on those issues, trying to determine what this outcome would be today. I'm holding my breath on medical bills that I need to pay because we have foundation repairs in our main home. You can see this is a metal beam that was put in. It's sunk into the cement floor. It's braced at the top. However, they're bowing out. Here's another shot of another wall. Here's a new crack. I mean, we're feeling like we're going to be taxed out of our home, but we can't repair our main home. We need to. Here's a Zeller home inspection. They say there's movement on this wall. The supports there are bowing. We need to be able to get these steel support posts in both the south rooms as well. These items were all included in my packet when I sent it originally, so they had the information at hand. My original home has some repair issues that are going to cost us a lot. When we built the building in our backyard, it's an established neighborhood. We love it. But we had to upgrade the utilities. We had to upgrade the electrical from the pole. It was expensive. We had to upgrade the plumbing out to the sewer to the street. It was a long, repair and expensive. We're holding our breath on some things until we get a decision from you folks. We're not asking to not pay our taxes. We're asking you to just make it reasonable. From instead of being 453, we're saying 310,000. Make it reasonable. We'll pay our taxes. Help us find some relief here. We're just praying for some mercy on us. But above all, don't tax us out of our home. We love the neighborhood. We want to stay.
Would you give me the number that you asked for?
310, right?
310.
That's what I thought you said.
And you're valued currently at 453.
Right.
And you may have some staff here on this. Is this, all of this information was in the original packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that it was.
You said ADU. I'm not familiar with that term. What?
Neither were we. We found out a lot of stuff as we went through this process. It's additional dwelling unit.
Okay.
And that's something else we're kind of bumping up against over and over again in this process, is that like some of the city guys don't talk to the other city guys. One inspector tells you something else. You guys heard this before, I'm sure. But then the city and the county didn't talk to each other either. And so we get stuck and we just say, fine, we'll make the amendments. We'll do what we need to do.
So when you asked for the lowered assessment, what were you told as to why it couldn't be lower? Do you have a?
Nobody's given us a solid anything. I'm asking for this based on sales and assessments of similar properties and the condition. Number one, January 1, we weren't up. We were framed in, but we didn't have a $200,000 addition.
Yeah. Appreciate the paperwork that you brought to support that.
And that is something that, you called in a referee. He goes, wow, there's a big packet here I'm going to have to go through. We're just stating the case.
What they signed up for.
Maybe Mr. Zig or somebody else, if somebody still doesn't agree with the evaluation as we approved today, what's the process for them? Is there a next step, or is this the end of the road?
Nope, next step would be that they do have the option to appeal to Turk. It's $40. It's very taxpayer friendly. Properties that are now less than $2 million all go to a single commissioner hearing. It's very informal, where there's just basically, I say, a conversation that occurs between the commissioner, the assessor's office, and the taxpayer. In between there, again, I encourage the assessor's office, and they're very good about getting out there and looking at things. It sounds like this has maybe already been presented and perhaps has been looked at. I don't know that because I can't see the protest. But it's very common for us then to resolve these, after this stage, where maybe we do have new information that comes out. We're able to look at more things. Just that's the next step, is going to Turk. But again, we're very proactive in working with the taxpayers and trying to resolve these, simply because they still do have to pay the taxes, and we recognize that, and we do want to fix these and avoid potential problems again in 2024.
Does somebody going to Turk need an appraisal, need an attorney? Is I mean, is it
Not necessarily. I mean, it would depend largely on the property. I would say most single-family homes are not handled by an appraisal. The ones we see appraisals on are much larger, multifamily, commercial-type properties. Certainly, taxpayer can. We do see those as well. I think those run maybe around $500 or so. I'd be kind of guessing a little bit based on what I know in the history. So that's certainly a possibility. A lot of times too, it's just sometimes having to talk with the assessor and making sure that this information was in fact reviewed and considered in determining the value today.
And this is probably not a question for you. I don't know if it's a question for Great Plains or the assessor's office. How do we assess a building that is in the process of being built on, it looks like it wasn't done on January 1st. How do we handle that? I don't know. This is actually, in the 5 years I've been on the board, I haven't seen this happen here, where someone, where a building was, in process but not done yet. So I honestly,
typically, I believe
this is new to us, or at least new to me.
Typically, the assessor will go out there and they'll kind of determine what percentage of the building they believe to be complete, because certainly understand what she's saying, that the building permit's not complete and everything, but at the same time, someone can't say, I want to hold off on closing out my building permit and then do it on January 2nd. Well, my property should be vacant land. So my understanding is that the assessor typically looks at and kind of determines a percentage of the building that's done on January 1st, and that would be considered the improvement. And Brian Grimm is shaking his head yes. That's what
Thank you for clarifying that he is shaking his head yes.
So a hypothetical, like there's a building that's gonna happen sometime on 9th and P Street. It's 27 stories, but whoops, there was a story in the paper. They said they're gonna readjust their plan. You can't tax them on what they think they're gonna do.
That's correct. If it's not there, hasn't even started on January 1st, it'd be valued as vacant land. Now, let's say on January 2nd, they go put that shovel in the ground for the first time and finish the property, the house, we'll say a house, and 3 months a little later. That property would not come back onto the tax rolls until January 1st of the following year.
That's what I'm asking for.
And I don't know the specifics of yours at all, so I can't speak to that, what happened there.
So do we have any information on this one? What percentage was done according to the assessor's office? Do we know?
I don't know. I'd have to go pull the protest
Yeah,
packet.
I didn't think you would know. I was wondering if the assessor's, if there's any way to reference that, or.
Yeah.
We don't have the personally.
I have a question that might be a Brian question. Brian, as Mary Beth presented her case, she talked about the difference between a cottage house and an ADU. What is that difference and how does that affect? Do you want to come to the mic? How does that affect what the assessment should be?
Brian Grimm, Lancaster County Assessor, Register of Deeds. Every house is going to be, or building is going to have a different, say, $1 per square foot attached to it.
Right.
That's just, I'm kind of going in general terms here. I don't know, without looking further into this one individual property, if it's valued more toward the line of a ranch, if it's valued more in the lines with a cabin, without looking at it, without having general numbers in front of me. I don't know how this one was valued, but typically you're going to have, for the built as type, they are all going to be valued a little bit differently.
But the term that it's called doesn't make a difference?
Terms a lot of times are going to be regional. One region might call a ranch house a ranch house. You could have some that are called split entries or split levels. It's all in how it's viewed and consistency on how they're named. So we may name something one way here in Lancaster County, and as long as it's consistently done the same way, we would be fine in those regards. When you start to get into inconsistencies in how things are named, you run into some problems with valuations.
One thing just kind of add sometimes too is that the title that the assessor uses is kind of somewhat irrelevant, for lack of a way to put it.
That's what I was wondering.
As an example, I think you guys call a second floor the rural part on like the assessor card. You show that, show the sketch. Is that accurate?
On the second floor?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we might call a second floor, the assessor titles it as rural, but it really doesn't change how it's treated. It's just sort of a category, so we know what we're looking at. On the assessor card too, they'll have things named as like 904 and 903. It's just internally how they categorize. Was it a wood deck? Is it a porch? What is it?
how do I tell right now what percentage of this building was, in the assessor's opinion, completed?
As of this minute,
How do I,
as of right now, I couldn't tell you as of right now. I mean, we could go back in and visit with, I could go back over and visit with the appraiser that it's assigned to, if need be.
Would it be reflected on the property record card in terms of like what percent would just?
We'd have to look at the notes.
And that'd be effective as of January 1. That, if we look now, it'd be the same one as was looked at by the assessor, correct? You always only update those once a year, is that?
Right. Yep.
what's the protest number?
My protest number is 23-02620.
02620.
Yes.
Hang with us.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, there you are. Page 372.
Thank you. That's hugely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I'm inclined, I don't know, this is by far and away my least favorite part of this job, because we are not professionals in this, right?
Right.
Well, no, we're not. I mean, we're like, truly, like, we're not trained in this. We're not appraisers, and there's 4,500 pieces of property that we have to, that we'll issue final order on. And I agree with you. It doesn't seem like a building that wasn't finished off, an ADU or a guest cottage or whatever we're calling it, that wasn't finished off, would likely increase an appraisal by $220,000. That seems unlikely to me. Not impossible, but unlikely. I mean, I'd have to see the property. But it just...
No gold toilets, nothing like that.
Right.
Did you have something?
Yeah,
further
I guess I would just
information for you?
comment that it sounds like what we're looking for is someone to specifically talk to this one
Mm-hmm.
property. We explicitly aren't prepared to look at anything because you guys have asked us not to, not because we don't want to.
Right.
It's just that we're not asked to do another hearing here.
Right.
And what Dan had outlined is that you can go to Turk with a property like this, and then it
what
has
is
a very
Turk?
specific one commissioner. We want one person to look at it and be consistent with it.
Right.
That's what we're asking for, and I think that's the opening here.
Which-
Without looking at it and having a new hearing, we wouldn't be able to see it all.
Which is the challenge when these
Yeah.
things come before us. Dan, would you mind explaining what TURC is?
So TURC is TERC. It stands for Tax Equalization and Review Commission. It's a panel of three, we'll have four people who hear these. You'll get a letter after today that'll have kind of what the final value is. You'll need to include that on your appeal form. But in that letter will be very detailed instructions about, how to appeal it, where to appeal, and the timeline to appeal it. And then once it goes there, they then can now make adjustments after today to the value of the property. So unfortunately, like, a lot of us just don't have the information today, and I understand what you're saying, but that's kind of the way to allow us to continue to look at the property and determine if an adjustment is needed.
And I believe in a meeting last week or the week before, you described it as being pretty friendly
It's very
to use. so
Yes, it is very
You don't likely need an
taxpayer-friendly.
attorney or anyone to
I would
help.
say majority of the ones that I see, a large majority of the ones that come through do not have the attorneys. Again, the attorneys are typically for more complex properties, where you talk about, millions and millions of dollars, lots of issues and things like that to look at.
The assessor would also look at anything that's an open building permit, something like this. They would review those, I think, probably late in the year, as close to January 1 as you can. So if there's an open building permit, we'll see in the notes, they'll say, as of December 28th, this was 50% done, 10% done, and they'll have notes to say, plumbing was roughed in but not there. And so without seeing it, you're correct, it's difficult to understand, but it sounds like on January 10th, it was finished. And so they would ask those questions to say, looks like you're here, when will you be finished? And so it's based on the building permit until it's finished, and until 100%, but those notes would have that, and the Turk Commissioner would be able to review that
Excellent.
really on a very specific basis, rather than, and an accessory dwelling unit versus a cottage it's not common. It's not a common thing that it's just a typical ranch that everyone in the neighborhood has. It's like someone having a pool in the neighborhood. It is a unique one, which is why Turk is around, and to get a very specific eye on this. So I think what we're getting is hopefully exactly what is necessary for this property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Is there anyone else here today to speak? Seeing none, we may proceed. We need a...
I would move approval on final action.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the final action.
Do I
Please.
need to, did I?
Do we?
Do you have to read that?
Yeah, probably.
I think
Oh,
you need to
yes, you read
that.
the
Let me-
correct terms. You're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
You move to accept the recommendation.
Yep, I move to accept the recommendations of the referee coordinator for 2023 real property valuations as established by the record, except where the Board of Equalization determined a revised value was warranted during the appeal process.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the recommendations of the referee coordinator. Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Best,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Now I would move to close the Board of Equalization acting upon individual real property valuations for 2023.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to close the Board of Equalization meeting. Please call the roll.
Best,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Schulte,
Yes.
Flowerday,
Yes.
Yocum.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Move we adjourn.